Okay. Okay. So we have justice, 9 of them serve that they serve for their entire lives. We have the chief justice, who is right now John Roberts, who is the leader of the Supreme Court. And I believe this was the last vocabulary word was majority. Okay, so majority just meaning that more than half. Okay, more than half. And with a Supreme Court that has 9 members, there will always be a majority decision. So there will never be a tie, unlike in the Senate, where there are 100 members and there could be 50 for, 50 against. In the Supreme Court, there's always going to be a majority because it's an uneven number, right? So the closest it can get is 5-4. All right. And for if you just joined, we're just briefly reviewing last Thursday's class, what we talked about before we go into what we will be discussing today. Okay, so we went over the vocabulary, and then now, so we have the different structure of the courts. The judicial branch is not just the Supreme Court, it is also the Court of Appeals and the district courts, right? It is those, all 3 of those working together, right, to interpret the Constitution, to interpret the laws, to examine the laws, evaluate the laws, right? And the Supreme Court, which is just one court, which is the highest court in the United States and the country, makes the final decisions on laws and legal issues. Okay? So usually it starts at the bottom with the district courts, and then it could move up to the Court of Appeals. And then if the Supreme Court decides, it could move up all the way to the Supreme Court. Right? We kind of went more in depth about this on Thursday. But whatever the Supreme Court says, right here, there's nothing above the Supreme Court. So whatever the majority decision is made by the Supreme Court is the rule. So that's how it will be interpreted, right? There's no more, there's no other court to appeal to go up to. All right, and that's why the Supreme Court is so important. Okay, so now we have the justices, and another important number you will need to know is number 9. Okay, so there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. They all vote on different cases that are presented to the court, and the majority, meaning more than 50%, wins. Okay, so let's say there's a case that's presented to them that Congress decided to limit free speech. Well, like in last week, like on Thursday, we all decided that that was an unconstitutional law if that were to take place. But they all have to vote on it, right? And if 5 justices agree and say that it's unconstitutional, then the law will not be enforced. If 5 justices or more say that it is constitutional, then it will be enforced. And that's the final decision, right? And once again, once they are on the Supreme Court, once a justice is on the Supreme Court, they are on the Supreme Court. They serve either until they resign or quit, right? So either until they quit or until they die, okay? So there's no term limits, like president for 4 years, senator for 6 years, representative for 2 years. For Supreme Court justices, it is forever, until they can no longer serve, until they quit or until they die while serving. All right? Once again, the Chief Justice, what do they do? So they lead the courts and they help guide discussions. They also make sure that the voting goes properly, right? So they all the justices will vote on cases, and the Chief Justice is in charge of making sure the voting is done well according to how it's supposed to happen, right? And also, the Chief Justice is the person that does the oath of office for the President of the United States during or on Inauguration Day. So you might have seen John Roberts on TV uh, just a few months ago on January 20th. Okay. All right. We did a little bit of these two activities. So the two major criteria that the Supreme Court uses to determine whether something is a good law or a bad law, right, are these two terms up here. So constitutional or unconstitutional. Okay. Constitutional, meaning that it is a good law, it follows the Constitution. Unconstitutional, meaning that it is a bad law and does not follow the Constitution. Okay? And so, Congress, for example, if Congress makes a law banning free speech, we all agreed that that would be an unconstitutional law. And the reason why is because it violates or goes against the First Amendment. Okay? Um, and like I mentioned before, we want to think of the Supreme Court or the judicial branch as a whole. We want to think of that as the referees of our government. And the Constitution is the rule book, okay? And that's what tells us what is constitutional, what is unconstitutional, okay? So pretty simple. The next one was Congress makes a law to put Tom Brady on the $1 bill. So this is what the dollar bill looks like right now. That's what the dollar bill would look like if the Supreme Court allows it. And we also said on Thursday that this would be an example of a constitutional law. And it is constitutional because Congress is in charge of printing money. Okay, so Congress deciding what will be on our money is, well, it follows the Constitution. Okay, it is in line with the rules of the Constitution. So therefore, this is constitutional. Okay, so Congress does indeed have the power to do this. Now, if you want to get specific about where it says it, you could say in Article 1 of the Constitution, it says this, and you could point the article, the section, and the clause. But we don't need to get into all of that today. All right, just know the difference between constitutional and unconstitutional. And obviously, understanding that the judicial branch is the referee of the government. So they make sure that not one branch becomes too powerful, that the things they are doing are good and are in line with our Constitution. Okay, and obviously, if they did not if we did not have a judicial branch, then we would not have a good government, right? Without following the rules, there is no point of having a constitution. It would just be words, right? So you need somebody or a large group of people or a whole branch of government to make sure that everybody else is following the Constitution. Okay, and that's what the judicial branch is. All right. And we'll just go through these really quickly. So, what is the highest court in the United States? Yes, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. How many justices are on the Supreme Court? Perfect. 9. Who is the Chief Justice of the United States now? Perfect. John Roberts. And those are all the questions. Okay. So we'll go over to what we're doing today, which, if you have your textbook or the outline, you will know is rights and responsibilities. Okay. And then on Thursday, I'll get into that once we're done. Okay, let's see. So I'll go to slideshow. All right. So rights and responsibilities. This is especially important to know. Okay. What rights and responsibilities we have as people, not just living in the United States, but also as you become a citizen, there will be extra responsibilities that you will have, okay, and rights as well as a citizen rather than a LPR or legal permanent resident. All right. So we'll kind of show what rights people have, whether you are a citizen or not, and what extra rights and what extra responsibilities come with being a citizen of the United States. Okay. So vocabulary that you'll need to know to understand this lesson. So the first one, amendment, which we've talked about before, but it's always good to go back and refresh our memory. So this is a change or an addition to the Constitution. Right here it says the First Amendment, which is one of, I'd probably say the most famous amendment and the most important as well, you could argue. Okay, Bill of Rights. Now these are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Okay, so we have 27 amendments in total. 27 changes. There have been 27 times we have changed the Constitution. Okay, the first 10 were back in 1787 when the Constitution was written. All right, so those 10 were all passed together. They all changed the Constitution together. But the way they changed the Constitution was that they guaranteed everybody in the United States, whether you are a citizen or not, certain rights. Okay? So the Bill of Rights are called the Bill of Rights, okay, because they give us our basic rights, okay, from the government. So things that cannot be taken away from us, okay? And those are the first 10 amendments. So the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, okay? And then obviously vocabulary, freedom, which is another word for a right. And this is something that we are allowed to do. Okay, so this is something that we are given the freedom to do, given the right to do. So when we talk about rights in this class, we're not talking about the direction, we're not talking about going right, taking a right on this road, but more about rights in terms of freedoms. Okay, so just like on the last slide, we have the Bill of Rights. Another way to say this, although it's called the Bill of Rights, so don't call it anything different, but rights basically means freedoms. Okay, so it could also be called the Bill of Freedoms, if that helps you think about it in an easier way. All right, but freedom is another word for a right. Okay, pretty simple. And then we have a right, which is a legal entitlement or freedom granted to people. So this is something that is given to us by our government that cannot be taken away. Okay, and this image down here says everyone has inalienable rights. All right, inalienable just meaning that they cannot be taken away from us, and use them. Okay, and these posters that the people are holding up. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all of these rights that we are guaranteed as anybody living in the United States are listed in the First Amendment. And that's why this amendment specifically is so important, because it lists 5 different rights we have, which is the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of petition, freedom of assembly. Okay? So we can say what we want, we can believe what we want, we can write or print what we want, we can tell the government whatever we want, and we can gather however we want. And those things cannot be taken away from us. All right. So that is what a right is. It's just a different way of saying freedom, a freedom. So a right to do something is being free to do something. Okay? And responsibility is another important vocabulary word. And this is something a person should do for their country or their community. Okay? And so as we're talking about rights and responsibilities, they're kind of the opposite of each other. So we have, let's do this. So a right is something granted to people or given to people by the government. And a responsibility is something people do for their country, government, community. Okay? So it's just about what you give and what you take. Okay? So a right is something you are given, a responsibility is something that you give. Okay? Um, and that's just the main difference between a right and a responsibility. Okay? When we're talking about it in the context of this class for um, civics, right? For talking about government. Okay. Another one to get out of the way. If you've read the textbook, or maybe you'll read it in the future, this chapter, there's a little tiny section that talks about this, and it'll make sense more as we get into the lesson. But selective service is an example of a responsibility, right, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But just to get a little bit background, so when I talk about this, when we talk about selective service, it is a system where men register for potential military service. Okay? So if you've heard of in the 1970s during the Vietnam War, so this wasn't too long ago, so shouldn't be anything. Maybe some of you have heard of this, but the government selected young men to serve in the military. So they didn't volunteer. They were forced to fight in the military in Vietnam for the United States. Okay, so usually it's called a draft, being drafted into the war. Um, this whole system, that whole way of doing things, that whole government program is called selective service. Okay, and as of now, it's only for young men. So young women are do not have to do this. Only men do. Um, and so it is just in case that the U.S. government wants to uh, force people to join the military. Okay, and that's all a part of being a citizen. Um, I remember when I turned 18, I got a letter in the mail that said you have to register for selective service. So I had to put my address, my name, phone number, email, all my information, just in case that in the future the military decides to select me for uh, to serve in the armed forces, in the military, right? So that is what that is for. Okay, but since this 1970s, we have not had the need to use this system. All right. Oath of allegiance. Next vocabulary word. Everybody here will eventually do the oath of allegiance once you do your N400 exam and you pass your citizenship interview. You will do an oath of allegiance to the United States at your citizenship ceremony. And all an oath of allegiance is a promise made when becoming a U.S. citizen. So basically, a promise that you will be loyal to the United States, especially in times of war, things like that. All right. Okay. And another thing I want to mention here, since I just said it, uh, oath of allegiance, you'll raise your right hand and you'll read from this right here, from a piece of paper that they give you. You'll repeat after somebody that is in the room that's saying it with you, like a government official. Um, and just because it says that you will be loyal to the United States, that doesn't mean you need to, drop everything from your home country. Uh, you know, last I think it was last night or a few nights ago, Mexico and the United States played. I don't know if anyone watched it, but my heritage being Mexico, but living in the United States as a United States citizen, I still cheered for Mexico. It's okay to not or to hold on to your traditions. I'll always cheer for the Mexican national team over the United States in soccer. So when it says you'll be loyal to the U.S., it just mainly means you won't share our secrets with uh, China or Russia, things like that. Things that have to do with war, which I don't think anybody here will be involved in. So, okay. Any questions about the vocabulary so far? Kind of a lot. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. 7 words today. Any questions about the vocabulary so far? Okay. Sounds good. All right. Okay. The Bill of Rights. Um, so after this week, we will talk about more of the history of the United States. So we get away from the boring politics and we'll start talking about history. But just as a little bit of introduction, just trying to introduce it today. Um, when the Constitution was created, when it was written at the Constitutional Convention, one of the things that was pointed out, right, is that okay, we have rules for how our government will work, but we do not have guaranteed freedoms for people in the country. So, yes, we have a system. We have, okay, the legislative branch makes laws, executive branch enforces laws, legislative branch evaluates laws. But what about the people? How do we know that Congress can't just make a law saying you cannot express your own opinions anymore, right? Because there's nothing in the Constitution back then that guaranteed us the right to free speech. And so they basically made a deal. Okay, so they said if you vote for the Constitution and this becomes our new rule book, our new government, then we will create 10 amendments, right, which will be called the Bill of Rights, and it will specifically list out the things that the government cannot take away from each person that is in the United States, whether you're living in the United States or visiting the United States, citizen, non citizen, doesn't matter. It applies to everybody inside the United States. And so they agreed, they made the deal. And there are two sides, right there. Those are the first two political parties in the United States, which we'll talk about next week. Okay. But the Bill of Rights was created to give concrete or specific freedoms to everybody inside the United States so that they knew that nothing could be taken advantage of by the government. Okay? And so the Constitution was written and created in 1787. So 4 years later, in 1791, the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution um, as a result of that deal that they made with each other. The two political parties being the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, which we'll learn next week. Okay, and like I said before, it includes the first 10 amendments. Okay, first 10 amendments are in the Bill of Rights. Okay, the most important of those being The First Amendment, which gives us the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of petition, and freedom of assembly. Okay, so it's five different rights in one amendment, so it's very important. All right, some of the other amendments would be the right to a trial, the right to bear arms, right, to own guns, the right to not have your uh, possessions or your property searched or seized by a government official, right? So, for example, if a police officer asks you to search your car or your house, you can say no, and that is because of the Bill of Rights. Okay, so there are certain rights that you have because of these first 10 amendments. Okay, and like we said, so the First Amendment gives people five freedoms. Okay, and this is the most important amendment that you'll need to know for your interview. Okay, um, so the five freedoms are speech, religion, assembly, press, and petition the government. Okay, so in plain language, so saying this not as a political way of saying things, but you have the freedom to say whatever you want, to believe whatever religion you want, or no religion at all. That's your choice. The right to assemble, to come together with other people. This could include protesting or even just maybe a book club. If you want to share different ideas about things with other people, you have that right to gather with other people. You are not. It's not illegal to talk about political opinions or things like that because someone doesn't want you to. Freedom of press means the freedom to for newspapers to publish the news, right, about things that are going on, even if it's not good for whoever's in power. Uh, and lastly, petition the government, meaning that we have the right to tell the government what we don't like or even what we do like. But we can always um, reach out to the government and tell them what we think about the job they're doing. Okay, so these are all very important freedoms to remember. Okay, I believe um, for the interview, you'll need to know at least three. Okay, at least three of these five freedoms guaranteed to us by the First Amendment. You will need to know. Okay, so that's important to try to memorize some of these. Speech and religion are usually the easiest ones, and maybe assembly would probably be the next easiest. Okay, but you'll need to know, I believe, at least three of these five freedoms for your interview. And obviously, it's best to know all of them, all five, if you can try to memorize them. Okay, more rights and freedoms. Right, so freedom of religion means practice any religion or no religion. Um, so right to a fair trial if accused of a crime. That's another right we have given to us by the Bill of Rights. Then obviously at the bottom, right to express opinions and participate in democracy. Okay, so right to express opinions, that'd be the First Amendment, right? So those are some more examples of rights and freedoms that we have guaranteed to us in the United States that the government cannot take away. Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about rights, right? And we also, so these are things given to us, but we also have responsibilities, so things that we have to give. Some of these include obeying the law, right? So the term rule of law, um, this ties into that term as well. So responsibilities for everyone in the entire United States. Okay, even if you are, well, I would say, yeah, even if you are not a citizen, you still have to give this to society or to the government and it's part of living here in the United States, or even just visiting, right? So obeying the laws, that's obvious. That's a responsibility that everyone has to obey the laws. Okay, and if you have a job, then everyone, even if you're not a citizen, must pay federal taxes every year by April 15th. Okay, which everyone is aware of. And then also another responsibility for everyone in the entire country. Um, if you are a man between the ages of 18 and 26, it would be to register for selective service. So, just in case the United States decides that they want to select people to go to war, to serve in the military. Okay. I believe before I did say this was for citizens, but I forgot. I was wrong. This is for everybody in the United States. So, citizen or non citizen, if you are a man between the ages of 18 and 26, you must register for selective service. Okay, now, some rights and responsibilities just for U.S. citizens. So, these right now don't apply to you guys because you're not yet U.S. citizens, but will in the future. Okay, for example, voting is an example of not just a right, so you have the right to vote, but you also have the responsibility to vote. So voting is not just a right, it is also a responsibility. So it's both. Okay? So voting is a right and a responsibility. Okay, but voting in federal elections, meaning for president, for senators, for representatives, um, only United States citizens can vote in those elections. Now, in some cities, such as New York City or Chicago, mainly big cities, you can vote for mayor, for example, without being a U.S. citizen because they want everybody's input in the entire community. Okay. But if you want to vote in a federal election, meaning somebody that goes and works in Washington, D.C., you must be a United States citizen. So that is so voting in federal elections is a right only for U.S. citizens and is also a responsibility only for U.S. citizens. Okay, so it says that right here. Voting is a right and a responsibility. Okay, citizens must defend the Constitution and obey U.S. laws. Now, obviously, obeying laws is for not just citizens; it's for everybody, right? But at the top here, defending the Constitution. So if you are selected for military service, that could be defending the Constitution. Also, serving in elected office could be defending the Constitution, right? They make an oath of office that says, I swear to preserve and protect the United States Constitution, right? So, serving in office, right? Whether that's a senator, a representative, or as president, is only for United States citizens. So if you are not a United States citizen, you cannot vote for or you cannot run for office unless your city allows it. Okay, but that's at the local level. For federal elections, you must be a United States citizen. All right, and also, for president, be 35 years old, etc., etc. Okay. Um, And once again, another example of both a right and a responsibility would be um, would be running for office because you have the right to run for office to serve your country, but that's also a big responsibility as well. Okay, um, so that would be one of the questions that you might be asked on your interview. What is a right for U.S. citizens? What is a responsibility for U.S. citizens? And voting or running for office could be the answer to either one of those questions because they are both a right and a responsibility. Okay. Becoming a U.S. citizen. So we all kind of know this process by now, right? Um, So there are two ways: by birth or naturalization. Birth, if you have watched the news, Donald Trump currently is trying to get rid of birthright citizenship. So this could be changing. But as of now, you still, if you are born in the United States, you are still guaranteed to be a United States citizen. Um, and as we all know, to become a U.S. citizen through naturalization, so if you weren't born in the U.S., that would include the application, test, and the oath of allegiance. So we all are familiar with that. Okay. Now, the oath of allegiance, to prepare you guys for what you'll be saying in that. Um, so there'll be a lot of promises that you'll make in this oath, right? So give up loyalty to other countries, defend the Constitution and obey laws, serve in the military if needed, do important work for the nation if needed. So now all four of these sound very like, oh, maybe I don't want to be a citizen anymore. This seems like a lot. Uh, this usually never happens. So usually people are not served to call to serve in the military or called to serve in the military or do important work for the nation. These two at the bottom are mainly for uh, were added after World War II, which was an extraordinary set of circumstances that does not happen, every 5 years, right? And then obviously the one at the top, give up loyalty to other countries. All that means, and what a lot of these promises are saying, is that in war, you will always be on the side of the United States. Okay, so now that you are a United States citizen, if we go to war with the country that you came from, then you won't side with that country. You are now an American. Basically, that's what it's saying. Um, so once again, like you don't have to stop making tamales on the weekends. No one's gonna be mad at you for that. If the United States plays Mexico, you can cheer for Mexico like I do. Or if you're from El Salvador, you can cheer for El Salvador or Costa Rica or wherever. It just mainly means in wartime that you should be loyal to the United States, not share our secrets with other countries, things like that, right? But these were kind of added after World War II when that was a very, very important goal of the United States was to win the war in Europe, right? But that doesn't really apply right now, and hopefully will never apply again. Okay, so any questions about rights and responsibilities, about maybe the First Amendment, Bill of Rights? Any questions about that? Okay, so for our questions today, there are a lot of them listed, but we're not going to do all of them. Some of them will come, and I'd rather practice those in the later chapters. So we'll go to our text. Let's see. Let me go to the textbook. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Okay. So if we go to textbook, go to the chapter. Oh, oh. Okay, there we go. Keep going down. What is that? Judicial branch. Okay, next chapter. Okay, so this is what it looks like in your textbook if you were to read it about this chapter. And then you have all these questions on the side. Okay, so some of these we'll skip. We'll start with this one right here. So, what is an amendment? What is an amendment? Perfect. Change to the Constitution. Exactly. Okay, what do we call the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? Perfect. The Bill of Rights. Okay. Oh, and I was actually wrong about this. So, for the next question, you only need to know one right or freedom from the First Amendment. So, what is one right or freedom from the First Amendment? Yep, freedom of speech. Now let's try to get all five. So we have freedom of speech. What's another one? Freedom of religion, assembly, press, Religion we already said. What was the last one? Starts with a P. So we have, yeah, petition. Petition. Yeah. So we have freedom of religion, press, petition, speech. What was that? Yeah, assembly. Yeah, assembly. See, even I forgot the last one. Yeah, but you only need to know one. So I was wrong. You don't need to know three. You only need to know one for your interview. And usually, the easiest one is either speech or religion. All right. Okay. Now, what are two rights of everyone? So not just U.S. citizens, but everyone living in the United States. What are two rights? Now, that would be a responsibility because it's something that you have to give. So what's something that you are given by the government? What is something that is given? Yeah, voting. Oh, what was that? Yeah. So both of those would be examples. So voting, or actually, let's say this. So voting, I actually wouldn't say on the interview. Okay. So fair trial, yes, that would be good. But voting will actually not say for the interview because it depends on the person you have, whoever is interviewing you. Because they could say no to that because for federal elections, you must be a U.S. citizen, right? And the question's kind of trying to trick you because it says everyone, right? So not just U.S. citizens, but everyone in the United States, right? So everyone's given a fair trial. That's true, but depending on where you live, not everyone is allowed to vote if you're not a U.S. citizen, right? So for this one, I actually wouldn't say vote. But what would be another one? So what would be another right besides just fair trial? Yeah, either of those would be correct. So think about, and you could even, if you memorize all five of the rights from the First Amendment, you could just use those on the next question. So let's say you get, okay, what is one right or freedom from the First Amendment? And you say, oh, freedom of speech. And then right after, they ask you, what are two rights of everyone living in the United States? You could say the same thing, freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And boom, you got the question right. All right, so those five rights that are given to you in the First Amendment could save you in your interview by knowing those, all five of them, trying to know as many as possible. All right, okay, next one. Okay, so what are two ways that Americans can participate in their democracy? Yeah, voting would be one, and what's another one? Yeah, you could say that. Protect, yeah. So defending the Constitution, that could be a correct answer. What I would say, the easiest way to get this question correct, 100% of the time in your interview, would be to say voting, right? So that's an obvious one. You're participating in democracy by voting for people, but also running for office would be a guarantee to get that correct. Because if you're running for office, you're definitely participating in democracy. Another thing you could say would be, let's see, think of First Amendment rights. So protesting could be another one. All right, so that would be another example of participating in democracy. Um, so yeah, if you know, once again, if you know the five rights of the Bill of Rights or the First Amendment, you could say, speech, meaning, saying whatever you want about the government, and then petitioning the government, and that would be correct as well. All right, but usually what's said by other students that works out very well. The answer that works very well would be voting and running for office. Is usually what's given like 100% pass on this question. Okay. This one's pretty simple. The next one. So, what is freedom of religion? Yeah. Yeah. So, to believe whatever you want. And that could be something or nothing at all. Right. So, it's not just the freedom to choose whatever religion, but to decide not to do or to practice a religion either. All right. This one we've seen before. What is the rule of law? Perfect. Everyone must follow the law. Let's go back up here. Okay. This one, everyone might probably already know. So, when is the last day you can send in federal income tax forms? Yep, April 15th every year. So, if you have a job, you got to do your taxes before or on or before April 15th. Okay, when must all men register for the selective service? So, what age range? Yeah, 18 until 26. Yes, perfect. 18 to 26. Now, if you're born in the United States, like I was, and you go to school in the United States and you live here your entire life, then 18, you have to get it done. Or else they could, give you fines, things like that, right? But the reason why it's 18 to 26 is obviously because some young men come into the United States when they're 21 or 25, right? They are from another country and they come to the U.S., right? But if you're a man that comes to the United States between the ages of 18 and 26, you must register for the selective service. All right, so that's why it's important to know that age range, not just 18, because that only applies to men that are already living in the U.S. But to those that come a little bit later, when they're in their 20s, they still have to um, enroll or register for selective service. Now, if they're 27 and they enter the U.S., then they don't have to, right? But between those ages, 18 and 26, all men must register for the selective service. Okay. Yeah. These questions try to trick you like that, right? So this one over here said everyone, right? And this one over here, same thing, says all men. So unless it says U.S. citizens, it means everybody. So citizen, non-citizen, all men must register for the selective service, whether you are a citizen or not. Right? Yeah. Is okay. In the United States, military service is not only for men, so women can join the military, but being forced to join the military is only for men. Yeah, so so they volunteered. So they chose. Yeah, so they chose. So women can join the United States military, right? But the only people that can be forced to join the military are men. Yeah, so women cannot be forced to join the military. Only men can be forced to join the military. All right. But if you want to volunteer, anybody can, men or women. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're lucky, right? We could get chosen to join the military. Let's see. Okay, next one. So name one right only for United States citizens. Yes, voting. Exactly. Yeah, that's the most simple one you can remember, it's just voting for United States citizens. Okay, what is one responsibility that is only for United States citizens? Yeah, exactly. Could be voting as well. Yeah. So voting is a right and a responsibility. Um, and well, that would be for everybody. So that remember, so this is asking only for United States citizens, right? But serving in the military or registering for selective service, right? That's for everybody. But this question, oh yeah, go ahead. That's if anybody, right? So if you have a job, even if you're not a citizen, you still have to pay taxes. So that would be for everybody, right? But the question is asking only for United States citizens. So you got to kind of like, yeah, the questions are kind of tricky. They're trying to trick you. They're trying to make you think one thing so that you get it wrong. So just make sure that when it says, for example, up here when it says all men, right? Or over here when it says um, or was it of everyone, that you think in that terms of, okay, there are things for everyone and there are ones just for United States citizens. The one over here, right, says only for United States citizens. So technically, while yes, United States citizens uh, can or have to pay their taxes, right, if you have a job, that's not only for United States citizens, right? So it wouldn't just be, so that would be an incorrect answer because it's not only for United States citizens. So voting would be a correct answer to this. If you want a second answer, a backup, just in case you forget, um, another answer to this would be jury duty. Okay, so serving on a jury. Um, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with what that means, um, but when we have trials, I mean, if you've ever seen, Law and Order or, a show, a trial, yeah, yeah, yeah. So usually people are familiar with it. Yeah, the people that are in the back and that are serving on the jury, they watch the trial and they vote whether the person is guilty or not guilty. That's a responsibility of only United States citizens, right? It's a resp- Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah, so that would be responsibility only for United States citizens. So you could say jury duty or voting, right? And yeah, it's a responsibility. So it's something that you give to the country, the government, society, right? This one we won't do today. We'll talk about that when we get into the history part. Okay, how old do citizens have to be to vote for president? We didn't talk about this, but I just want to see if you guys already know. Not 21, 18. Yeah, so we didn't talk about it. We will in the future, but I just wanted to see if you guys already know. But yeah, so to vote for president or to vote in federal elections, you have to be 18 in the United States. All right. Okay, and then last one. What is one promise you make when you become a United States citizen? Yeah, exactly. Loyal to the U.S. Perfect. Yeah, doesn't mean that you have to, you know, stop. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Doesn't mean you have to stop making the tamales on the weekend with your abuelita. That's all fine. Just in war, you got to support the U.S. In soccer or football, not so much. I still support Mexico. I, yeah, there you go. Depending on where you come, yeah, arepas, whatever. I'm Mexican, so I like tamales, but arepas are good too. I don't think so, but that's another discussion. All right. So, any questions so far from the lesson today? Anything that was kind of confusing? Okay, great. So Thursday we will talk about U.S. geography, which will be probably a short lesson, and then next week we will do U.S. history, which should be a lot more or less boring than everything we've done so far. All right, so I'll see you guys on Thursday. Thank you.